Nobody makes a video about the spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet is where this is won or lost. The exciting part of airdrop farming is the possibility. The boring part is the cost, and the cost is the only half you actually control. Gas spent, capital tied up, time invested, all of it real and all of it certain, against a reward that is uncertain and maybe nothing. Treating this like the math problem it is, rather than a lottery ticket you buy on vibes, is what separates people who operate sustainably from people who quietly spend more than they would ever see back. This is the honest arithmetic, with no promises attached. Start with the uncomfortable frame. Here is the frame that changes everything. Your costs are guaranteed and your rewards are not. Every transaction spends real gas. Every wallet funded ties up real capital. Every hour spent is an hour gone. Those are certainties. The token that might come is a maybe, on terms you do not control, at a value nobody can promise. Once you see it that way, the whole activity stops being a lottery you are owed and becomes an expense you are choosing to take on, against an uncertain outcome. That framing is not discouraging. It is clarifying, because you can only manage the half of the equation that is real, which is the cost. What gas actually costs. Gas is the fee you pay to have a transaction included on a chain, and it varies enormously by network and by how busy that network is at the moment. A transaction that costs a trivial amount on one chain can cost many times more on another, and the same action during a congested period can cost a multiple of its quiet price. For anyone doing lots of transactions across lots of wallets, this adds up into a real number, and most people never actually total it. The first act of control is simply knowing what you are spending, because you cannot budget a cost you have never measured. Count your transactions. The math starts with a boring count. How many transactions does a given strategy actually require per wallet over its full timeline? Genuine sustained activity across a season is not a couple of clicks. It is many interactions over months, and each one costs gas. Multiply the per transaction cost by the count, then by the number of wallets, and you have your real gas budget. That number is often far larger than people expect, precisely because they never did the multiplication. Doing it upfront turns a vague sense of small fees into a concrete figure you can decide whether you actually want to spend. The chain choice matters enormously, because gas varies so much between networks. Which chains the strategy lives on dominates its cost. An approach centered on an expensive network can cost many times more than a similar one on a cheaper network for the same activity. This is not a suggestion to chase the cheapest chain blindly, since where genuine opportunity lives matters more than where gas is cheapest. But it does mean that chain choice is a budget decision, not just a technical one, and ignoring it is how people end up spending far more on fees than the whole effort could plausibly return. Know what each network costs you before you commit months to it. Capital allocation across wallets. Beyond gas, there is the capital each wallet needs to actually do something. Funds to trade, to provide, to hold. Spreading capital across many wallets means each has less to work with, and there is a real question of whether thin funding across many wallets does anything meaningful, or whether fewer, better funded wallets doing genuine activity is the smarter allocation. More wallets is not automatically better. It is more cost, more capital tied up, and more to manage for a benefit that is far from guaranteed. The honest question is always whether an additional wallet adds real value or just adds expense. The diminishing returns problem. There is a point past which each additional wallet costs more than it plausibly adds, and finding roughly where that is matters. The first few wallets, genuinely used, may make sense. The 50th, thinly funded, doing mechanical activity that is likely to be filtered anyway, is often pure cost. People scale up wallet counts on the assumption that more equals more reward, without checking whether the marginal wallet is actually pulling its weight against its guaranteed cost. Thinking at the margin. What does this next wallet cost, and what does it realistically add, is the discipline that keeps a strategy from quietly becoming a money loser. Time is a real cost too. Gas and capital are visible. Time is the cost people conveniently forget. Genuine activity across many wallets over many months is a serious time commitment, and time has value even if it does not show up as a fee. And honest accounting includes it, because a strategy that technically comes out ahead on gas but consumes hundreds of hours may not be worth it once your time is priced in at all. This is not to say do nothing. It is to choose deliberately, with the full cost including your hours in view, rather than drifting into an enormous unpriced time sink by default. Budgeting before you start. The practical move is to set a budget before committing, not to discover the total afterward. Decide what you are willing to spend on gas, tie up in capital, and give in time across the whole effort in advance. That upfront number is a spending decision made with a clear head rather than a running tab you look at with regret later. It also gives you a stopping rule, a point where you have spent what you decided to spend and stop, regardless of sunk cost. Operating to a budget is the single most operator-like habit in this entire space, and almost nobody does it. The sunk cost trap. A specific danger to name is sunk cost, the pull to keep spending because you already spent. I have put this much gas and this many hours in, so I cannot stop now. That reasoning is exactly backwards, because past spending is gone whether you continue or not, and only future costs and future prospects should drive the next decision. A budget with a stopping rule set in advance is the defense against this, because it lets you decide with a clear head today what your regretful invested self should do later. The money already spent is not a reason to spend more. Mesties are netting it out, honestly. Put together, an honest accounting looks like this. Total gas across all wallets and all transactions over the full timeline. Capital tied up and its opportunity cost. Time invested at some real value. All of that is your guaranteed spend. On the other side sits a reward that is uncertain in existence, timing and value, and that you do not control. If seeing those two side by side makes a strategy look bad, that is the math doing its job, telling you something before you spent months finding out the hard way. If it still looks worthwhile to you, at least now you are choosing with open eyes. Plenty of people engage with genuinely interesting protocols, enjoy the process, learn a great deal, and treat any reward as a bonus on top of activity they valued anyway. That is a completely reasonable stance, and it survives the math fine, because the costs buy something real, regardless of any token. What does not survive the math is the fantasy version. Unlimited wallets, mechanical activity, huge unpriced time, on the belief that a guaranteed windfall is owed. The arithmetic is only discouraging to the version that was never realistic. Matching effort to conviction. A useful principle is to let your spend track your genuine conviction about a project, not the hype around it. A protocol you actually find interesting and believe in is worth real engagement and real cost, because you get value from using it either way. A project you are only touching because a thread said to farm it does not deserve much of your limited budget, since the only payoff is a maybe you do not control. Allocating your finite gas, capital, and time toward genuine conviction and away from hype-driven busywork is how the boring math and the honest strategy end up pointing the same way. The timing lever, a small lever worth knowing, is timing. Gas prices swing with network congestion, so the same transaction can cost far less during quiet periods than during a frenzy. For activity that is not time-sensitive, simply doing it when the network is calm, rather than at peak, can meaningfully lower the total bill over many transactions. This is not a reason to obsess over the perfect moment, and chasing pennies is its own waste of time. But being loosely aware that gas has cheap and expensive hours, and not transacting into obvious congestion when you do not have to, is a free saving that quietly adds up across a long campaign. The cost of good hygiene. There is a cost hidden inside good hygiene, worth accounting for honestly. Keeping wallets genuinely separate, funding them from varied sources, and moving assets around for real reasons costs more in gas and effort than routing everything through one convenient path. That is a real trade-off. The cleaner separation is not free. It does not change the recommendation, but it should go into the budget, because people are sometimes surprised that operating carefully costs more than operating sloppily. The extra spend buys genuine separation, and whether that is worth it is a decision to make deliberately with a number in front of you, not a surprise to discover later. Keep a spend record. The same like record keeping that helps everywhere else helps here too, applied to money. Tracking what you actually spent on gas and tied up in capital, per wallet and over time, turns a vague feeling into a real figure you can judge. Most people dramatically underestimate their total spend precisely because they never tally it, and the running record cures that. It also feeds the stopping rule, since you cannot know you have hit your budget if you never counted what you spent. A simple ledger of costs is unglamorous, and it is exactly what keeps the boring math honest, instead of imaginary. The honest takeaway: the reward half of this equation is out of your hands, So manage the half that is in them. Count your transactions and know your gas. Treat chain choice as the budget decision it is. Question whether each additional wallet adds real value or just cost. Price in your time. Set the budget with a stopping rule before you start, and respect it against the pull of sunk cost. Do that and you operate sustainably, spending deliberately on things you value, instead of quietly bleeding more than this was ever realistically going to return. The math is boring, and it is the whole difference. The actual spreadsheets I use, the way I estimate gas and set a budget with a stopping rule, and the fuller write-up of this arithmetic are at airdropfarming.org, with no hype and nothing here being financial advice or a promise about any reward. Subscribe if you want the operator view, the boring math included, and none of the guaranteed riches talk. Next time we go inside the process, this all feeds into how a protocol actually runs its airdrop allocation review, how they filter and threshold and handle appeals, and where the line really sits between a coordinated cluster and an honest user caught by mistake.